platform, as you probably know, is A Life of Activism and Dedication, an interview of Abe Markman by ethical culture leader Joe Chuman. Dr. Joe Chuman is our senior leader of the New York Ethical Culture Society and of the Bergen Ethical Culture Society in New Jersey. No?
Well, I'm the oldest. So.
He's the oldest. You sound he's the oldest. All right. Okay. He teaches religion and human rights at Columbia University and at Hunter College. Joe is our true intellectual who regularly shares his insights with us during his platform talks. Yes. Today, however, he's playing a different role. He's interviewing society member Abe Markman. Abe Markman graduated from City College in 1951 with a BA in sociology and from NYU in 1958 with an MSW in social work. Abe's first settlement house experience after graduation was running the teenage program at the Hudson Guild, founded by John Elliott, a former leader of ethical culture. Abe had a 60-year career as an inner-city youth center director, an activist, and co-founder and CEO of a highly successful social service nonprofit, the Neighborhood Self-Help by Older People Project. It is now in its 37th year, serving several areas of the Bronx. Two of his essays were published by the Humanist magazine. Overcoming a Heritage of Prejudice is one of them, and the other one is Why Are So Many Black Americans Killed by Police? I need to read that one to find out why. Also, he's also published in the online African American Politics 365, where he has an article called, quote, Challenging Obama's Calmness. His latest essay, When Progress is Unethical, appears in the AEU Winter Dialogue. Also, Abe regularly conducts the Ethics in the News discussion group here at the Society. In recognition of his activism and courage in pursuit of justice, he was awarded the 2010 Community Service Award by the New York Society for Ethical Culture. So, so I think we might do this video first. Are we going to try that? Somebody else is going to come in this video.
Yeah. blessings. I'm wishing you all the best on your 90th birthday. I wish you many happy returns as we move forward. And I want to thank you for not only being an icon on the Lower East Side, but for all your support and all your thoughtful suggestions throughout my lifetime. I wish you the best continued health that you can have. And then again, thank you. Happy birthday. Take care. Peace.
Hi, Uncle Abe, it's Maxine. I'm so sorry that I can't be there with you today to celebrate your 90th birthday, but I want you to know that I love you very much, and I wish you everything good, and I'm just so thrilled that you have been my uncle for all these years, because you always have been so special to me. So enjoy your day. I'm sure you're being surrounded by many, many, many more people that love you. And just take care, and hopefully I'll see you soon. Bye.
My son did that.
Beautiful. All right, let me mic myself up here, and then we'll be ready to go. Should say Abe is a man of great accomplishment. I never knew he had been to the moon, though. Okay, this is a very special morning. Obviously, our is different. It's special. It's more interactive. And it's special because we really have our very honored guest and member and friend with us today, Abe Markman. And I feel honored that Abe has selected me to, in effect, interview him on his book, The Color of Time, My Life on the Edge of Change. And I have a series of questions that I want to direct towards Abe that come out of the book and that relate to his life and values, both personal life and his public life. Okay? And the book, I assume, is for sale, right? And you'll autograph it, right? For those who make a purchase. Very good. Very special morning. Okay, let me begin. Abe, please, if you will, tell us where you come from and where you grew up. Tell us a little bit about your background, and especially those formative influences in molding your values, both the people in your early life who helped you develop your value system, as well as early events that shape your values.
Before I do, I just want to thank so many people here. I want to thank the society. The Edward Culture Society has been a great friend of mine, and to a person who's not here today, my dear friend and buddy and partner, Virginia, who's recuperating in the hospital. I think if you went around the room here today, you'll find that there's so many people that helped me write some of the chapters, lived them through with me. And they're in the book. Many of you that are here today, I've described as best I could in the book. I especially want to thank a couple of people. First of all, Joe. I so admire you, and I so appreciate the fact that you took a chance. You didn't even know what was in the book, and you agreed to do this. And my son, Michael, who is now my inspiration. He's just been chosen as Teacher of the Year He's won a nomination for the Emmy Awards. He's a teacher, an artist. He's my tutor, and my great friend, Michael.
Right.
And I'm not going to forget somebody, Pat Behrens. When I had an idea of writing my first essay, Overcoming a Heritage of Prejudice, she saw something in that article, and she said, Abe, no matter how many times you change this, I'm going to work with you. And that was, people credit me with writing a very good article. It was very well received, but Pat was the one who got me to that point. In terms of your question, Joe, I grew up in a part of the Bronx that had open fields. It's now, some people consider the South Bronx, but it was sort of the northern part of the South Bronx. At that time, it wasn't the South Bronx. It had open fields. It had a farm a few blocks away. We were able to play on the street night and day. As long as we came home to eat and sleep, our parents hardly ever questioned what was going on. We were a group of mischief makers. We called ourselves the Warden Avenue Window Breakers. And we got into all kinds of trouble that young kids nowadays would be ticketed for and held for. We hitched rides in back of trucks. Bruckner Boulevard, which is one of the main roads in thoroughfares in the Bronx, was an unpaved road. And my father owned a three-family house on a block of duplicate houses like that. We were all white, most all Jewish, and I learned so much later as to who I am from thinking about answering that question. I learned race attitudes because there were no blacks there, and all we saw were whites. Whites were the only ones who came to the house, the only ones that we saw got married, the only ones who were heroes in the comic books we read. When we went to the movies when we got older, the only blacks we saw were characters like Stephen Fletcher, who was considered lazy and a no-gooder. And so I didn't realize it until I read a sociology piece. It explained exactly what I grew up with as the ingredients for becoming prejudiced, because you just thought that you were the people who were important and the others weren't, and that became part of my psyche. I learned from the kids on the block who I was. They used me in different capacities, and some of those capacities stayed with me all my life. First of all, they burnt a hole in my soul by mistreating me. I was the youngest on the block, and on hot days, after they played and took their turn batting in stickball or whatever we were playing, they would pack up and go home. They wouldn't give me a chance to play. When I was the last one to get ice skates, they would knock me down and have fun. But then they used me to help them get into the movie theater. On hot days when they kept the side door open in the movie theater, we would, they would send me in, and if it was all clear, I'd put up my hand so they would come in after me. When we wanted to steal stuff from the Woolworths on Southern Boulevard, they would put me behind a rock. We'd all stay behind a rock and wait for the light to change. And because I was the smallest one, they said, "You run in there and hitch a ride to Southern Boulevard." And because the light was changed, the guy couldn't ride off, so my friends would pile in the back seat. So when I think about those things, then we played games. We played all kinds of games. Every game you could think of. Johnny and the Pony, Ringo Levio, pitcher, batter, catch. I mean, I can go down the list. And we thought we invented the games. And then we played the Water Avenue Windbreakers, played the Manor Avenue Boys. And we realized that they played the same games. And they stole our games. And believe it or not, when I took an anthropology course, it all came clear to me that this was the basis of tribalism. The actual basis of tribalism. And maybe that influenced my interest in sociology.
Yeah, okay. When I was asking you about values, I wasn't really thinking about you're becoming a thief, which is what you're talking about. I was thinking of, we know you really as a person of strong progressive principles and a progressive worldview, and I'm wondering where your progressivism comes from. You had mentioned that you had been beaten up, you were victimized when you were smaller, but beyond that, there must have been people in your life who imbued you with a progressive.
There are two influences, basically, my mother and father. My mother made me angry as hell. She disapproved of almost everything I did, and it was ratified by one of my brothers. I was the youngest of 5. And one of my brothers would echo my mother, "Abe learns too slowly, Abe will never finish school, Abe this, Abe that." And so that angered the hell out of me, and combined with the stuff I was getting on the street, I just felt like I was mistreated. And I think that's why I could identify with people. But my father, on the other hand, had a tremendous spirit. He would take me on walks and talk about the sky and explain the constellations. He would explain about the sun and how fast light travels to the earth. And I was just amazed. And the warmth and the love that he had for me. He just spent hours with me. He wouldn't come home unless he called and asked me what kind of candy I wanted. And he had a philosophy of socialism and so on. So I think those two things, one was the anger and one was the spirit.
Right, okay, very good. Early in the book you introduce us to Charlotte, who's an African-American woman with whom you fall in love, and you marry in 1953 when interracial marriages were extremely rare. Can you tell us about Charlotte, her background, and also the type of responses and reactions that you and she received because of your interracial marriage, both from your family and beyond your family, from society at large?
Right. Well, Charlotte was a close friend of Martin Luther King, and their families were very close. Charlotte's father was a doctor and a neighborhood physician, and he was the doctor of Martin Luther King's father and their family and all the people on Ashby Street. Charlotte was whereas I was very slow in school and very slow learner. Charlotte was a top-notch student. She was bright as hell. at 16, she was a senior in high school at Spelman High School. Spelman High School is equivalent to what Hunter High School is like. It was very hard to get into, but it was for black children. And when she was 16, Spelman was surrounded by black and one white college and the high school. And Charlotte decided that she wanted to sit in that park. There was only white kids who sat in that park. And she spoke to her classmates, and they were scared. They didn't want to do it. So she went to their parents, and she convinced their parents to have them sit in. So they sat in, and the white kids bothered them. So she went right up to the president of the college, of the white college, and she asked, she convinced this president that it was okay. And from then on, they integrated that park. So I asked her, well, what was Martin Luther King doing while you were this active? And she said, oh, he was in school studying philosophy. He really didn't get active till late in his in his career compared to Charlotte. So Charlotte was a terrific person. She defied the mores of the black bourgeoisie in Atlanta. A lot of people don't realize the tremendous energy that blacks used in her community to show that they were not the stereotypical black. And she didn't like that kind of upbringing, and she rebelled against it. Her own mother didn't want dark-skinned people to come into the house, but Charlotte did bring her close classmate in. So she was a special person, and I can go on. But
Yeah, no, I was asking about the types of challenges you confronted because of your marriage. You talk about your parents, you talk about your family, but also other reaction that you got from people beyond. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about
well, my mother and father were terribly shocked. They were terribly shocked. My father came up to visit us. Charlotte and I met at Irvington House, which is a resident home for children with rheumatic fever. And she was the girls' counselor, and I was the boys' counselor. And word got out, someone in the family snitched on us and told my parents that we were going out together. And my father came up in a fury. I've never seen him that angry. And he came up with in his car with my sisters and my sister-in-law. And they told me off. They said, how could you do this? You're going to embarrass us. You're going to do this. And my sister-in-law said, well, at least if you married a Chinese woman. You know, just ridiculous kind of stuff. Well, when we walked the streets of Westchester County together, we caused accidents. We actually caused that. People were so shocked. It was 1953. 1952 is when we were still engaged. So we caused it when we moved into a Jewish neighborhood. A woman saw us and fell down the stairs and broke one of her limbs. The custodian wouldn't give us the keys to our letterbox. And we had heard that there was an interracial couple who had the cross of fire. What do they call that?
cross burning.
Yeah,
Cross burning.
they put burning cross on their lawn in Queens, and the mayor took a very strong stand. The mayor Pelletary, and he took a very strong stand. He had the police come over and take care of the situation. And so when the custodian would give us the keys, we went over to the police station and we told them what was happening, and they got to the house before we did and told us custodian off, and he gave us the keys. When we went south to visit her family, when we got to Washington, D.C., we couldn't stay in the same train car. And that shocked the hell out of me. But there was nothing I could do. I mean, this is the way it was. So we got to south on separate trains. And then when we got there, her parents were so frightened of our being in Atlanta together that they had her grandfather take me to the house and her father take her to the house. When I came back down the second time, the plane couldn't get through a rainstorm past Washington, D.C. and landed and said that they would pick us up with Eastern Airlines the next day, but we had to find our own accommodations. We went to black-owned motels in the rain, in the storm, and they wouldn't take us in. One motel after another, they wouldn't take us in, and one finally did. And when we got there, Charlotte said, "How dare you come down here at this time? The house could be bombed." I had to stay in the house while the rest of the family went to Charlotte's father's funeral. And then our children went through a lot. I mean, I can go on and on.
I wanted to ask you about your children. You and Charlotte have two children, Jenny and Michael, and you speak in the book not only very lovingly, but very admiringly of your children.
Very what?
Admiringly of your children. And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about them. Chandy became a political activist. You mentioned in the book that she was actually further to the left than you are. But then also, and this is extraordinarily touching, your beloved daughter dies when she's only 25 years old, which is probably the greatest sorrow that any parent can confront. And I'm wondering if you can tell us a bit about Chandy and her commitments, and also about Michael and his.
Shani became a teenager in the middle of the 60s. And she faced rejection over and over and over and over. She was light-skinned, but she was treated terribly. When she was in kindergarten, her kindergarten teacher said her drawing was illogical. It wasn't logical. And so my wife and I would go to the teacher and talk about, what are you talking about? It was the kind of thing, a surrealistic kind of drawing that she was a bright kid, and she was in an intellectually gifted class in elementary school. And the teacher started talking about interracial marriages. And knowing Shandi, she spoke up. And she told the teacher that, what's wrong with interracial marriages? Well, this woman, which I thought was a substitute teacher, actually came to my house when I was working uptown in East Harlem. I worked nights with teenagers, and knocked on the door and bothered my wife, and we took her to court. But the school system couldn't fire her for some reason. When we moved into this co-op on the Lower East Side, some of the white girls invited her to a birthday party when she was, say, 9 or 10. And then when she was 11 or 12, the mothers would come into the park and take the girl in hand and say not to play with her. Not to play with her. When she was in school and I thought, all the things that went on with her, I thought she was going to be the next Joan of Arc. She had a commanding presence, and she became a communist, but she was not a Stalinist. She was what is called the Communist Workers' Party, I think it was. And they were independent of the Stalinist type, but she was a socialist, and what was I saying?
Well, you were talking about her leftist commitments.
Oh, anyway, while she was in school, she wouldn't stand up for the Pledge of Allegiance. So we went to school and spoke to the principal and told him that she has the right to stand and sit whenever she wants. So she influenced a lot of people. There was one child who admired her so much, who lived in our building, and she was conservative, and she was very somewhat arrogant, and Shawnee refused to play with her. And the child was despondent. You could just see her on the bench, almost in tears. And finally, Shawnee took her under her wing. This girl came from a very conservative family, is now at Georgetown University teaching human rights and immigrant rights. And she influenced a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
But now my son Mike, who was so different from her, he grew up 7 years later, and it was after the Civil Rights Movement. That's why I call the book The Color of Time, because according to whether you were active before, during, or since the Civil Rights Movement, my family, your character was so different. The experiences you had were so powerful and so different. And Michael didn't experience the same things that Shawnee did. But as an adult, as a black man, he's been stopped by the police and harassed in terrible ways. And so time has changed. But Shawnee was light-skinned and faced tremendous problems. He was darker skinned and and it was because of the time. It was because of the change in time.
Okay. As mentioned, you got your master's degree in social work from NYU and have had a very extensive career as a social worker and have brought your social work skills into your activism. I'm wondering if you can just briefly, Abe, tell us some of the venues in which you worked as a social worker. They seem to me to be reading this very challenging, very difficult environments, starting with the Wiltwyck School for Boys and then moving on to quite a few other venues where you work professionally. Can you tell us a little bit about your work?
Well, the first few jobs I had, I was a failure. I thought I could influence young teenage men who were in trouble. And as Pat Burns, you know, my big problem is limit setting. And I let the kids get away with too much, just like my father let me get away with so much. But it wasn't until I became the program director of a youth center in East Harlem that I really had the confidence. And I was able to deal with things that, looking back, I wonder how I walked into riots and dealt with some of the gangs. One of the gangs was ready to turn over a police car, and I knew those kids. They were the Dragons. They were the worst gang in East Harlem. But we had a good relationship, and I talked them out of it. They didn't turn over the car. The youth center was going to be taken over by the Black Panthers and the Young Lords, and there's a whole chapter about that. I won't go into the whole thing, but the interesting thing was I couldn't figure out how to handle these guys, because they said, "Hey, the only way I'll accept you is you act like John Brown." and so I remembered my work with gangs. And when you work with gangs, one of the ways to break through is to see them individually. And so I would take them aside and talk to them, and I got to know them, and I would say, why in the world are you taking your revolution out on me? I've given you a platform here, I've let you come in and talk and so on. And so they finally opened up. To make matters short, they found out that I was very active in the school strike of 1968. Charlotte was the leader of the parents group, but they needed someone to clip open the doors to let the children in from the front door, and no one could do it. They were nervous, and there were different reasons why no one could do it. So I took the clippers and I cut the chain, and the Daily News was there. They took my picture, so that the guys from the Black Panthers and the Young Lords came to me and said, "Abe, we're leaving the youth center. You know why? We revolutionized you. We saw your picture."
Okay. In a similar sort of venue, you spend a lot of time talking about your 17-year chairmanship of the East Side Call for Justice, which is a grassroots organization. Can you tell us some of the accomplishments of the East Side Call for Justice under your leadership?
Well, there's a Fia Dawson, Reverend Dawson. She and I conducted hundreds of youth shop, and Gail, you would be particularly interested with what to do when stopped by the police. Over the years, we conducted over 250 workshops with young people in East Harlem, and due to Elaine's connection with a program in East Harlem with ex-felons. And it was a tremendous experience. It was just, a Fia would tell stories about being stopped by the police while his son was present, and how his son would have to calm her down because he was worried that they both get in trouble with the police. I have done a lot of thinking about the police relation. I don't have enmity for the police, but I know that the police culture is powerful. It's powerful. If anyone stands up to the police culture, they'd be driven off the police force. And I can give you examples. And so we try to warn the young kids that there are ways to make changes in the police. And we gave them examples, because during the Giuliani years, we actually were not me, but people like Al Sharpton and Richie Torres, who were the leaders. We actually made sure that some of the cops who really shouldn't be in the force were put in jail. Who killed people, choked them. And we did all kinds of things. And we explained it to them, nonviolent, so on. But we told the kids that on the street, you can't win. And there's no way you can win with the police, and especially with stop and frisk. And it was very well received. We got commendations from the directors. We were invited back over and over again. What I think was my contribution, my sole contribution, what I did with you, Gail, you give me credit, but it was you about paid sick leave. But in terms of this, what I'm going to talk about now, it was something that I think I did. And that was the change of gun law in the city of New York, and ban the police from carrying their guns into a bar when they know they're going to be drinking. And it took me 30 years
Right.
of research.
Right.
As I followed cases in which police got away with all kinds of things outside and inside of bars.
Right.
And they finally changed the rule
Right.
based on the work that we did with the Call for Justice.
Marvelous, Abe. I want to move on to another great achievement.
Okay.
You bring a great deal of notice and honor to the New York Ethical Culture Society and its Public Issues Committee, which you led for a long time. And probably the high watermark of that committee was pushing for New York City's legislation that requires paid leave benefits, right? Something that's occurred in the city, and I know the committee that you headed here pushed for that, advocated for that very, very strongly. Can you talk to us about that process and what you did?
Yeah, well, first I want to say something about Gail. I didn't know you were here when I was crazy. But Gail, when we worked with you, we knew that elected office could be a noble profession. And in our time now, especially, you remind us of what a wonderful person you are and what elected service should be all about. And that's how we felt. Pat, I, Lee Loshak, Mary Friedman came to your office. And that's what we said when we left about you. And Gail explained the situation about paid leave. And she was able to get a veto-proof majority in the city council to support it, but the Speaker of the House wouldn't bring it to a vote. Now, I was active with a group called the New York State Paid Leave Coalition. And these were union people, these were women groups, this was a public advocate. I think Gail come to some of the meetings. And Phyllis Harrison Ross, who is no longer with us, is a great friend of mine, and was active on this committee. And she said, Abe, why don't we have a breakfast? I said, oh, God, for me to get up early. She said, yeah, these people are busy and they'll come. So sure enough, we had 60 people. We had a moderator from the news, from a business news channel, PBS News Channel, and Ann Clayson. Is Ann here? Ann explained to the group what ethical culture was about, and I spoke about the importance of walking in each other's shoes, because we had business people there, and we had advocates. And the advocates, I mean, when you talk about advocates, they didn't want to compromise about anything. And I think some of them are still angry with me because I look for a compromise. But anyway, the conversation was going on, and the advocates were just giving Chuck Hunt, who's the vice president of the Restaurant Association, a hard time. He had told us when we recruited him, I don't want people to throw tomatoes at me. And there it was. They were just coming after him. And so finally he said something. He said, you know, I would go along with sick leave if it became part of a package of benefits that we give. But no one picked it up. And so I turned to Gail and I said, Gail, would you consider that? And Gail said, yes, I would. And then I turned to the advocates, and I guess I caught them off guard or something, and they said, yes, we would. Well, Chuck Hunt, before he walked out, said, I'm never coming back to ethical culture. I was devastated. And then the rumors circulated that this was a failure. This was a total failure. And then Gail came to my rescue. And I don't know how you did it, but you put something in the bill that indicated that if a business provides sick leave through their normal benefit package, that they'll approve it. Well, it still didn't pass, but a leader in the women's movement, his name I forget, gave a warning to the Speaker of the House and said, who was running for mayor, and said, if you don't support the bill, that she would not support you for mayor. And Christine Quinn agreed to allow the vote to come to a vote. But Gail Brewer was the one who had so much support and admiration in the council that got that bill. The Mayor Bloomberg could not override the veto.
Okay. We did get a late start, so obviously we're going to end a little bit later, and I wanted to bring this, unfortunately, begin to move towards the end of our discussion. Abe, there are a lot of things I wanted to ask you about that we unfortunately can't get to. I just want to mention that when you read the book, when I read the book, what comes through is your extraordinary honesty. It really is very eye-catching. Honesty about your own strengths and your own weaknesses and the strengths and weaknesses of others. You really don't mince words. You're very, very direct and honest, and I really have to really applaud you for your honesty. It's very unusual and very direct. Two questions, and then we'll bring this to a close. One question you wanted me to ask that comes out of something you raised at the appropriately at the very end of the book, and we discussed before in other contexts, is you end with sort of what I have to call cosmic speculations, right? About how the universe is put together and how indeed a particular understanding of the cosmos, cosmological realities, could help in unifying the human species. And I know you wanted to talk about that. So why don't you, hold forth a little bit on your cosmological speculation and how it relates to the human condition.
I call it toward the survival of the human species. And I believe that unless the species as a whole has a mission, that will not survive. And the mission has a unified field theory. I took it from the physicists, but there's a sociological and economical field theory. And the field theory is we're not going to survive unless we figure out how to control the environment. There's no way we're going to survive. What life was going to be like in the later part of this century will not be livable for the people who are still here. That, unless we do something. The other thing is we have to find an economic system that's fair to everyone. And I think the philosophy of ethical culture has to be a key to how we go forward. We have to treat each other with love and respect. We have to expand our community beyond our block and our tribe and our country, our ethnic background. We have to do that. And I think one of the ways to do it is to see that there's something that really unifies us if we only look a little harder. This may be hard to take with some of my religious friends who are here, but I'm going to say it anyway. And it's been verified by anthropologists, is that the early man was intimidated by the night sky. He was frightened by what he saw. Meteors streaking across the sky, meteors falling into the earth. They were susceptible to the early storytellers, the shamans, the priests, started to tell stories to explain what the stars were all about. And those stories built up into biblical proportions, and the beliefs have become embedded in people's minds to the extent that I say keep an inch of doubt open, just an inch of doubt open, and with that inch to recall the wonder that the early man had of the stars. Recall that wonder is there within us. We all have it. We all wonder, how in the world could something as complex as almost infinity is here? How could it be? How could it be? And I believe, contrary to Felix Adler, who I admire, and I think of as my spiritual father, but I think he was wrong about his assumption that we can never know and we shouldn't bother. And when I talk to people, they say, well, Abe, we've got so many problems. Why should we wonder about the mystery of the universe? But if we as a species realize that we all have that wonder, if we can capture it and realize that that wonder could unify us across all kinds of barriers, if we allow it to. I don't expect anyone to jump up out of the chair and say, Abe, you're right. But I think when we get to Mars, when we find that there's intelligent life somewhere else in the universe, when we do things that are so spectacular and compelling, I think people will start to appreciate the fact. And I think, and while I have you, Ann, and Richard here, and you know, I talked to you about it, I want to change the mission of the ethical American Ethical Union. And I'm going to use this platform. I think the mission should include that, should include the fact that we don't know what we can know, and that science could take us there. John Dewey, who is now the more recognized philosopher of the ethical culture movement, has said that. He's written that science could know. And some of the physicists that I've studied have said that we are learning so much, so fast, that there's a chance that we will know the mystery of all mysteries.
Wow, you know, let's end it there. Hey, there are many more things that I wanted to ask you, but unfortunately we've really run so far over time, and we do have a memorial service this afternoon, so unfortunately we have to bring this to an end. Another warm expression of our gratitude for